God-given prophecy is history in advance. Church history is his story of Jesus building his church in the world from his place seated at the right hand of the Father in providence. The History of Protestantism by James A. Wiley is perhaps one of the most complete chronicles of that history. Thank you for joining me. We will continue right where we left off last time. From the hour that Ignatius resolved to think no more of his sins, his spiritual horizon began, as he believed, to clear up. All his gloomy terrors receded with the past which he had consigned to oblivion. His bitter tears were dried up, and his heavy sighs no longer resounded through the convent halls. He was taken, he felt, into more intimate communion with God. The heavens were opened that he might have a clearer insight into divine mysteries. True, the Spirit had revealed these things in the morning of the world, through chosen and accredited channels, and inscribed them on the page of inspiration, that all might learn them from that infallible source. But Ignatius did not search for these mysteries in the Bible. Favored above the sons of men, he received them, as he thought, in special revelations made only to himself. Alas! His hour had come and passed, and the gate that would have ushered him in amid celestial realities and joys was shut, and henceforward he must dwell amid fantasies and dreams. It was intimated to him one day that he should yet see the Savior in person. He had not long to wait for the promised revelation. At Mass his eyes were opened, and he saw the incarnate God in the host. What further proof did he need of transubstantiation, seeing the whole process had been shown to him? A short while thereafter the Virgin revealed herself with equal plainness to his bodily eyes. Not fewer than 30 such visits did Loyola receive. One day, as he sat on the steps of the church of St. Dominic at Manresa, singing a hymn to Mary, he suddenly fell into a reverie, and had the symbol of the ineffable mystery of the Trinity shown to him, under the figure of 3 keys of a musical instrument. He sobbed for very joy, and entering the church, began publishing the miracle. On another occasion, as he walked along the banks of the Llobregat that waters Manresa, he sat down, and fixing his eyes intently on the stream, many divine mysteries became apparent to him, such as other men, says his biographer Maffei, can with great difficulty understand after much reading, long vigils, and study. This narration places us beside the respective springs of Protestantism and Ultramontanism. The source from which the one is seen to issue is the Word of God. To it Luther swore fealty, and before it he hung up his sword, like a true knight when he received ordination. The other is seen to be the prophet of a clouded, yet proud and ambitious imagination and a wayward will, and therewith have corresponded the fruits, as the past 3 centuries bear witness. The one principle has gathered round it a noble host clad in the fruit of purity and truth. In the wake of the other has come the dark army of the Jesuits. Chapter 2. Loyola's First Disciples. Vision of 2 camps. Ignatius visits Jerusalem. Forbidden to proselytize. Returns to Spain. Resolves to make Christendom his field. Puts himself to school. Repairs to Paris. His 2 companions, Peter Faber, Francis Xavier. Loyola subjects them to a severe regimen. They become his disciples, Loyola's first 9 followers. Their vow in the Church of Montmartre. The Book of Spiritual Exercises. Its course of discipline. 4 weeks of meditation. Topic of each week. The spiritual exercises and the Holy Spirit. Visits Venice. Repairs to Rome. draft of rules, bull constituting the society. Among the wonderful things shown to Ignatius Loyola by special revelation was a vision of two great camps. The center of the one was placed at Babylon, and over it there floated a gloomy ensign of the Prince of Darkness. The heavenly king had erected his standard on Mount Zion, and made Jerusalem his headquarters. In the war of which these two camps were the symbols, and the issues of which were to be grand beyond all former precedent, Loyola was chosen, he believed, to be one of the chief captains. He longed to place himself at the center of action. The way there was long. Wide oceans and gloomy deserts had to be traversed, and hostile tribes passed through, but he had an iron will, a boundless enthusiasm, and what was more, a divine call. For such it seemed to him in his delusion. He set out penniless, 1523, and begged his bread by the way. He arrived at Barcelona. There he embarked in a ship which landed him on the shore of Italy. Thence, traveling on foot, after long months and innumerable hardships, he entered in safety the gates of Jerusalem. But the reception that awaited him in the holy city was not such as he fondly anticipated. His rags, his uncombed locks, which almost hid his emaciated features, but ill accorded with the magnificence of the errand which had brought him to that shore. Loyola thought of doing in his single person what the armies of the Crusaders had failed to do by their combined strength. The head of the Romanists in Jerusalem saw in him rather the mendicant than the warrior, and fearing doubtless that should he offer battle to the Crescent, he was more likely to provoke a tempest of Turkish fanaticism than drive back the hordes of the infidel. He commanded him to desist under threat of excommunication. Thus withstood, Loyola returned to Barcelona, which he reached in 1524. Derision and insults awaited his arrival in his native Spain. His countrymen failed to see the grand aims he cherished beneath his rags, nor could they divine the splendid career and the immortality of fame which were to emerge from this present squalor and debasement. But not for one moment did Loyola's own faith falter in his great destiny. He had the art, known only to those fated to act the great part, for converting impediments into helps, and extracting new experience and fresh courage from disappointment. His repulsion from the holy fields had taught him that Christendom, and not Asia, was the predestined scene of his warfare, and that he was to do battle not with the infidels of the East, but with the ever-growing hosts of heretics in Europe. But to meet the Protestant on his own ground, and to fight him with his own weapons, was a still more difficult task than to convert the Saracen. He felt that meanwhile he was destitute of the necessary qualifications, but it was not too late to acquire them. Though a man of 35, he put himself to school at Barcelona, and there, seated amid the youth of the day, he prosecuted the study of Latin. Having acquired some mastery of this tongue, he removed, 1526, to the University of Alcalá to commence theology. In a little space he began to preach, discovering a vast zeal in the propagation of his tenets, and no little success in making disciples, male and female. The Inquisition, deeming both the man and his aim somewhat mysterious, arrested him. The order of the Jesuits was on the point of being nipped in the bud, but finding in Loyola no heretical bias, the Father Inquisitors dismissed him on his promise of holding his peace. He repaired to Salamanca, but there too he encountered similar obstacles. It was not agreeable thus to champ the curb of privilege and canonical authority, but it ministered to him a wholesome discipline. It sharpened his circumspection and shrewdness, without in the least abating his ardor. Holding fast by his grand purpose, he quitted his native land, and repairing to Paris in 1528, enrolled himself as a student in the College of St. Barbara. In the world of Paris he became more practical, but the flame of his enthusiasm still burned on. Through penance, through study, through ecstatic vision, and occasional checks, he pursued with unshaken faith and unquenched resolution his celestial calling as the leader of a mighty spiritual army, of which he was to be the creator, and which was to wage victorious battle with the hosts of Protestantism. Loyola's residence in Paris, which from 1528 to 1535 coincides with the period of greatest religious excitement in the French capital. Discussions were at that time an hourly occurrence in the streets, in the halls of the Sorbonne, and at the royal table. Loyola must have witnessed all of the stirring and tragic scenes we have already described. He may have stood by the stake of Birken. He had seen with indignation, doubtless, the saloons of the Louvre opened for the Protestant sermon. He had felt the great shock which France received from the placards, and taken part, it may be, in the bloody rites of her great day of expiation. It is easy to see how, amid excitements like these, Loyola's zeal would burn stronger every hour, but his zeal did not hurry him into action till he was ready. The blow he meditated was great, and time, patience, and skill were necessary to prepare the instruments by whom he was to inflict it. It chanced that two young students shared with Loyola his rooms in the College of St. Barbara. The one was Peter Faber, from Savoy. His youth had been passed amid his father's flocks. The majesty of the silent mountains had sublimed his natural piety into enthusiasm, and one night on bended knee, under the star-bestudded vault, he devoted himself to God in a life of study. The other companion of Loyola was Francis Xavier, of Pampeluna, in Navarre. For 500 years his ancestors had been renowned as warriors, and his ambition was, by becoming a scholar, to enhance the fame of his house by adding to its glory in arms the yet purer glory of learning. These two, the humble Savoyan and the high-born Navarrese, Loyola had resolved should be his first disciples. As the artist selects his block, and with skillful eye and plastic hand bestows touch after touch of the chisel, till at last the superfluous parts are cleared away, and the statue stands forth so complete and perfect in its symmetry that the dead stone seems to breathe. So did the future general of the Jesuit army proceed to mold and fashion his two companions, Faber and Xavier. The former was soft and pliable, and easily took the shape Loyola's master hand sought to communicate. The other was obdurate, like the rocks of his native mountains. But the patience and genius of Loyola finally triumphed over his pride of family and haughtiness of spirit. He first of all won their affection by certain disinterested services. He next excited their admiration by the loftiness of his own asceticism. He then imparted to them his grand project, and fired them with the ambition of sharing with him in the accomplishment of it. Having brought them thus far, he entered them on a course of discipline, the design of which was to give them those hardy qualities of body and soul, which would enable them to fulfill their lofty vocation as leaders in an army, every soldier in which was to be tried and hardened in the fire as he himself had been. He exacted of them frequent confession. He was equally rigid as regarded their participation in the Eucharist. The one exercise trained them in submission, the other fed the flame of their zeal, and thus the two cardinal qualities which Loyola demanded in all his followers were developed side by side. Severe bodily mortifications were also enjoined upon them. 3 days and 3 nights he compelled them to fast. During the severest winters, when carriages might be seen to traverse the frozen Seine, he would not permit Faber the slightest relaxation of discipline. Thus it was that he mortified their pride, taught them to despise wealth, schooled them to brave danger and contemn luxury, and inured them to cold, hunger, and toil. In short, he made them dead to every passion save that of the holy war in which they were to bear arms. A beginning had been made. The first recruits had been enrolled in that army which was speedily to swell into a mighty host, and unfurl its gloomy ensigns and win its dismal triumphs in every land. We can imagine Loyola's joy as he contemplated these 2 men, fashioned so perfectly in his own likeness. The same master artificer who had molded these 2 could form others, in short, any number. The list was soon enlarged by the addition of 4 other disciples, their names, obscure then, but in later years to shine with a fiery splendor, were Jacob Lainez, Alfonso Salmeron, Nicolas Bobadilla, and Simon Rodriguez. The first 3 were Spaniards, the 4th was a Portuguese. They were 7 in all, but the accession of 2 others increased them to 9, and now they resolved on taking their first step. On the 15th of August, 1534, Loyola, followed by his 9 companions, entered the subterranean chapel of the Church of Montmartre at Paris, and Mass being said by Faber, who had received priest's orders, the company, after the usual vow of chastity and poverty, took a solemn oath to dedicate their lives to the conversion of the Saracens, or should circumstance make that impossible, to lay themselves and their services unswervedly at the feet of the Pope. They sealed their oath by now receiving the host. The day was chosen because it was the anniversary of the Assumption of the Virgin, and the place because it was consecrated to Mary, the Queen of Saints and Angels, from whom, as Loyola firmly believed, he had received his mission. The army thus enrolled was little, and it was great. It was little when counted, it was great when weighed. In sublimity of aim and strength of faith, using the term in its mundane sense, it wielded a power before which nothing on earth, one principle excepted, should be able to stand. To foster the growth of this infant Hercules, Loyola had prepared beforehand his book entitled Spiritual Exercises. This is a body of rules for teaching men how to conduct the work of their conversion. It consists of 4 grand meditations, and the penitent, retiring into solitude, is to occupy absorbingly his mind on each in succession during the space of the rising and setting of 7 suns. It may be fitly styled a journey from the gates of destruction to the gates of paradise, mapped out in stages so that it might be gone in the short period of 4 weeks. There are few more remarkable books in the world. It combines the self-denial and mortification of the Brahmin with the asceticism of the anchorite and the ecstasies of the schoolman. It professes, like the Koran, to be a revelation. The Book of Exercises, says a Jesuit, was truly written by the finger of God and delivered to Ignatius by the Holy Mother of God. The Spiritual Exercises, we have said, was a body of rules, by the following of which one could effect upon himself that great change in which biblical and theological language is termed conversion. The book displayed on the part of its author great knowledge of the human heart. The method prescribed was an adroit imitation of the process of conviction, of alarm, of enlightenment, and of peace, through which the Holy Spirit leads the soul that undergoes that change in very deed. This divine transformation was at that hour taking place in thousands of instances in the Protestant world. Loyola, like the magicians of old, who strove to rival Moses, wrought with his enchantments to produce the same miracle. Let us observe how he proceeded. The person was, first of all, to go aside from the world, by entirely isolating himself from all the affairs of life. In the solemn stillness of his chamber, he was to engage in 4 meditations each day, the first at daybreak, the last at midnight. To assist the action of the imagination on the soul, the room was to be artificially darkened, and on its walls were to be suspended pictures of hell and other horrors. Sin, death, and judgment were exclusively to occupy the thoughts of the penitent during the first week of his seclusion. He was to ponder upon them till, in a sense, he beheld the vast conflagration of hell, its wailings, shrieks, and blasphemies, felt the worm of conscience, in fine, touched those fires by whose contact the souls of the reprobate are scorched. The second week he was to withdraw his eyes from these dreadful spectacles and fix it upon the Incarnation. It is no longer the wailings of the lost that fill the ear as he sits in his darkened chamber. It is the song of the angel announcing the birth of the child, and Mary acquiescing in the work of redemption. At the feet of the Trinity, he is directed to pour out the expression of the gratitude and praise with which continued meditation on these themes cause his soul to overflow. The third week is to witness the solemn act of the soul's enrollment in the army of that great captain, who bowed the heavens and came down in his incarnation. 2 cities are before the devotee, Jerusalem and Babylon, in which he will choose to dwell. 2 standards are displayed in his sight, under which he will fight. Here a broad and brave pennon floats freely on the wind. Its golden folds bear the motto, pride, honor, riches. Here is another, but how unlike the motto inscribed upon it, poverty, shame, humility. On all sides resound the cry, to arms. He must make his choice, and he must make it now, for the 7th sun of his 3rd week is hastening to the setting. It is under the banner of poverty that he elects to win the incorruptible crown. Now comes his 4th and last week, and with it there comes a great change in the subjects of his meditation. He is to dismiss all gloomy ideas, all images of terror. The gates of Hades are to be closed, and those of a new life open. It is morning with him. It is a springtime that has come to him, and he is to surround himself with light and flowers and odors. It is the Sabbath of a spiritual creation. He is to rest, and to taste in that rest the prelude of the everlasting joys. This mood of mind he is to cultivate while 7 suns rise and set upon him. He is now perfected and fit to fight in the army of the great captain. A comparable course of mental discipline, as our history has already shown, did Wycliffe, Luther, and Calvin pass through before they became captains in the army of Christ. They began in a horror of great darkness. Through that cloud there broke upon them the revelation of the crucified. Throwing the arms of their faith around the tree of expiation and clinging to it, they entered into peace and tasted the joys to come. How like, yet how unalike, are these 2 courses. In the one, the penitent finds a Savior on whom he leans. In the other, he lays hold on a rule by which he works, and works as methodically and regularly as a piece of machinery. Beginning on a certain day, he finishes, like the stroke of a clock, duly as the 7th sun of the 4th week is sinking below the horizon. We trace in the one the action of the imagination, fostering one overmastering passion into strength, till the person becomes capable of attempting the most daring enterprises and enduring the most dreadful sufferings. In the other we behold the intervention of a divine agent, who plants in the soul a new principle, and thence educes a new life. The war in which Loyola and his 9 companions enrolled themselves when on the 15th of August, 1534, they made their vow in the church of Montmartre, was to be waged against the Saracens of the East. They acted so far on their original design as to proceed to Venice, where they learned that their project was meanwhile impracticable. The war which had just broken out between the Republic and the Porte had closed the gates of Asia. They took this as an intimation that the field of their operations was to be in the Western world. Returning on their path, they now directed their steps towards Rome. In every town through which they passed on their way to the Eternal City, they left behind them an immense reputation for sanctity by their labors in the hospitals and their earnest addresses to the populace on the streets. As they drew nigh to Rome, and the hearts of some of his companions were beginning to respond, Loyola was cheered by a vision in which Christ appeared and said to him, "In Rome I will be gracious unto thee." The hopes this vision inspired were not to be disappointed. Entering the gates of the capital of Christendom, and throwing themselves at the feet of Paul III, they met a most gracious reception. The Pope hailed their offer of assistance as most opportune. Mighty dangers at that hour threatened the papacy, and with the half of Europe in revolt, and the old monkish orders becoming incapable, this new and unexpected aid seemed sent by heaven. The rules and constitution of the new order were drafted and ultimately approved by the Pope. 2 peculiarities in the constitution of the proposed order especially recommended it in the eyes of Pope III. The first was its vow of unconditional obedience. The society swore to obey the Pope as an army obeys its general. It was not canonical, but military obedience which its members offered him. They would go to whatever place, at whatever time, and on whatever errand he should be pleased to order them. They were, in short, not to be so much monks as soldiers. The second peculiarity was that their services were to be wholly gratuitous. Never would they ask so much as a penny from the papal see. It was resolved that the new order should bear the name of the Company of Jesus. Loyola modestly declined the honor of being accounted its founder. Christ himself, he affirmed, had dictated to him its constitution in his cave at Manresa. He was its real founder, whose name, then, could it so appropriately bear as his? The bull constituting it was issued on the 27th of September, 1540, and it was entitled Regimini Militantis Ecclesiae, and bore that the persons it enrolled into an army were to bear the standard of the cross, to wield the arms of God, to serve the only Lord and the Roman Pontiff, his vicar on earth. Chapter 3. Organization and Training of the Jesuits. Loyola's vast schemes. A general for the army, Loyola elected. Constitutions, made known only to a select few. Powers of the general. An autocrat, he only can make laws. Appoints all officers, etc. Organization. 6 grand divisions, 37 provinces. Houses, colleges, missions, etc. Reports to the general. His eye surveys the world. Organization. Preparatory ordeal. 4 classes. Novitiates, second novitiate. Its rigorous training. The indifferents. The scholars. The coadjutors. The professed. Their oath. Their obedience. The long-delayed wishes of Loyola had been realized, and his efforts, abortive in the past, had now at length been crowned with success. The papal bull had given formal existence to the order. What Christ had done in heaven, his vicar had ratified on the earth. But Loyola was too wise to think that all had been accomplished. He knew that he was only at the beginning of his labors. In the little band around him he saw but the nucleus of an army that would multiply and expand till one day it should be as the stars in multitude, and bear the standard of victory to every land on earth. The gates of the east were meanwhile closed against him, but the Western world would not have always set limits to the triumphs of his spiritual arms. He would yet subjugate both hemispheres and extend the dominion of Rome from the rising to the setting sun. Such were the schemes that Loyola, who hid under his mendicant's cloak an ambition vast as Alexander's, was at that moment revolving. Assembling his comrades one day about this time, he addressed them. His biographer Bobers tells us, in a long speech, saying, "Ought we not to conclude that we are called to win to God not only a single nation, a single country, but all nations, all the kingdoms of the world?" An army to conquer the world is what Loyola was forming, but he knew that nothing is stronger than its weakest part, and therefore the soundness of every link, the thorough discipline and tried fidelity of every soldier in this mighty host was to him an essential point that could only be secured by making each individual, before enrolling him, pass through an ordeal that should sift and try and harden him to the utmost. But first the company of Jesus had to elect a head. The dignity was offered to Loyola. His modesty declined the post, as Julius Caesar did the diadem. After 4 days spent in prayer and penance, his disciples returned and humbly supplicated him to be their chief. Ignatius, viewing this as an intimation of the will of God, consented. He was the first general of the order. Few royal scepters bring with them such an amount of real power as this election bestowed on Loyola. The day would come when the tiara itself would bow before that yet mightier authority which was represented by the cap of the general of the Jesuits. The second step was to frame the constitutions of the society. In this labor Loyola accepted the aid of Lainez, the ablest of his converts, seeing it was at God's command that Ignatius had planted the tree of Jesuitism in the spiritual vineyard. It was to be expected that the constitutions of the company would proceed from the same high source. The constitutions were declared to be a revelation from God, the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. This gave them absolute authority over the members, and paved the way for the substitution of the Constitution and canons of the Society of Jesus in the room of Christianity itself. These canons and instructions were not published. They were not communicated to all of the members of the society. They were made known only to a few, in all of their extent to a very few. They took care to print them in their own college at Rome, or in the college at Prague, and if it happened that they were printed elsewhere, they secured and destroyed the edition. I cannot discover, says M. de la Chalateas, that the constitution of the Jesuits have ever been seen or examined by any tribunal whatsoever, secular or ecclesiastic, by any sovereign, not even by the Court of Chancery of Prague. When permission was asked to print them, they have taken all sorts of precautions to keep them a secret. For a century they were concealed from the knowledge of the world, and it was an accident which at last dragged them into the light from the darkness in which they had been so long buried. It is not easy, perhaps it is not possible, to say what number of volumes the constitutions of the Jesuits form. Chalateas, Procurator General of King Louis XV, in his report on the Constitution of the Jesuits to the Parliament in Bretagne, speaks of a 50 volumes folio. That was in the year 1761, or 220 years after the founding of the order. This code, then enormous, must be greatly more so now, seeing every bull and brief of the Pope addressed to the society, every edict of its general, is so much more added to a legislation that is continually augmenting. No doubt whether any member of the order is found bold enough to undertake a complete study of them, or ingenious enough to reconcile all their contradictions and inconsistencies, prudently abstaining from venturing into a labyrinth from which we may never emerge, he simply asks, not what do the constitutions say, but what does the general command? Practically, the will of his chief is the code of the Jesuit. We shall first consider the powers of the general. The original bull of Paul III, constituting the company, gave to Ignatius de Loyola, with 9 priests, his companions, the power to make constitutions and particular rules, and also to alter them. The legislative power thus rested in the hands of the general of his company, that is, in a congregation representing them. But when Loyola died, and Linnaeus succeeded him as general, one of his first acts was to establish a congregation, and cause it to be decided that only the general had the right to make rules. This crowned the autocracy of the general, for while he has power of legislating for all others, no one may legislate for him. He acts without control, without responsibility, without law. It is true that in certain cases the society may depose the general, but it cannot exercise its powers unless it be assembled, and the general alone can assemble the congregation. The whole order, with all its authority, is, in fact, comprised in him. In virtue of his prerogative, the general can command and regulate everything in the society. He may make special constitutions for the advantage of the society, and he may alter them, abrogate them, and make new ones, dating them at any time he pleases. These new rules must be regarded as confirmed by apostolic authority, not merely from the time they were made, but the time they are dated. The general assigns to all provincials, superiors, and members of the society, of whatever grade, the powers they are to exercise, the places where they are to labor, the missions they are to discharge, and he may annul or confirm their acts at his pleasure. He has the right to nominate provincials and rectors, to admit or exclude members, to say what proffered dignity they are or are not to accept, to change the destination of legacies, and though to give money to his relatives exposes him to deposition, he may yet give alms to any amount that he may deem conducive to the glory of God. He is invested, moreover, with the entire government and regulation of the colleges of the society. He may institute missions in all parts of the world. When commanding in the name of Jesus Christ, and in virtue of obedience, he commands under the penalty of mortal and venial sin. From his orders, there is no appeal to the Pope. He can release from vows. He can examine into the consciences of the members. But it is useless to particularize. The general is the society. The general alone, we have said, has power to make laws, ordinances, and declarations. This power is theoretically bounded, though practically absolute. It has been declared that everything essential to the society is immutable, and therefore removed beyond the power of the general. But it has never yet been determined what things belong to the essence of the institute. Many attempts have been made to solve this question, but no solution that is comprehensible has ever been arrived at, and so long as this question remains without an answer, the powers of the general will remain without a limit. Let us next attend the organization of the society. The Jesuit monarchy covers the globe. At its head, as we have said, is a sovereign who rules over all, but is himself ruled over by none. First come 6 grand divisions termed assistanzen, satrapies or princedoms. These comprehend the space stretching from the Indus to the Mediterranean, more particularly India, Spain, and Portugal, Germany and France, Italy and Sicily and Poland, and Lithuania. Outside this area, the Jesuits have established missions. The heads of these 6 divisions act as coadjutors to their general. They are his staff or cabinet. These 6 great divisions are subdivided into 37 provinces. Over each province is placed a chief, termed a provincial. The provinces are again subdivided into a variety of houses or establishments. First comes the house of the professed, presided over by their provost. Next come the colleges, or houses of the novices and scholars, presided over by their rector or superior. Where these cannot be established, residences are erected for the accommodation of the priests who perambulate the district, preaching and hearing confession. And lastly may be mentioned mission houses, in which Jesuits live unnoticed as secular clergy, but seeking by all possible means to promote the interests of the society. From his chamber in Rome, the eye of the general surveys the world of Jesuitism to its farthest bounds. There is nothing done in it which he does not see. There is nothing spoken in it which he does not hear. It becomes to us to note the means by which this almost superhuman intelligence is acquired. Every year a list of the houses and members of the society, with the name, talents, virtues, and failings of each, is laid before the general. In addition to the annual report, every one of the 37 provincials must send him a report monthly of the state of his province. He must inform him minutely of its political and ecclesiastical condition. Every superior of a college must report once every 3 months. The heads of houses of residences and houses of novitiates must do the same. In short, from every quarter of his vast dominions comes a monthly and tri-monthly report. If the matter reported on has reference to persons outside the society, the constitutions direct that the provincials and superiors shall write to the general in cipher. Such precautions are taken against enemies. Satialite is the system of the Jesuits, inimical to all governments. Thus to the general of the Jesuits the world lies naked and open. He sees by 1,000 eyes, he hears by 1,000 ears, and when he has a behest to execute, he can select the fittest agents from an innumerable host, all of whom are ready to do his bidding. The past history, the good and evil qualities of every member of the society, his talents, his dispositions, his inclinations, his tastes, his secret thoughts, have all been strictly examined, minutely chronicled, and laid before the eye of the general. It is the same as if he were present in person, and had seen and conversed with each one. All ranks, from the nobleman to the day laborer, all trades, from the opulent banker to the shoemaker and porter, all professions, from the stool dignitary and the learned professor to the cowled mendicant, all grades of literary men, from the philosopher, the mathematician, and the historian, to the schoolmaster and the reporter on the provincial newspaper, are enrolled in the society. Marshaled and in continual attendance before their chief, stand this host, so large in numbers and so various in gifts. At his word they go, and at his word they come, speeding over seas and mountains, across frozen steppes, or burning plains, on his errand. Pestilence or battle or death may lie on his path. The Jesuit's obedience is not less prompt. Selecting one, the general sends him to the royal cabinet. Making choice of another, he opens to him the door of Parliament. A third he enrolls in a political club. A fourth he places in the pulpit of a church, whose creed he professes that he may betray. A fifth he commands to mingle in the saloons of the literati. A sixth he sends to act his part in the evangelical conference. A seventh he seats beside the domestic hearth, and an eighth he sends afar off to barbarous tribes, where, speaking a strange tongue and wearing a rough garment, he executes, amidst hardships and perils, the will of his superior. There is no disguise which the Jesuit will not wear, no art he will not employ, no motive he will not feign, no creed he will not profess, provided only he can acquit himself as a true soldier in the Jesuit army, and accomplish the work on which he has been set forth. "We have men," exclaimed a general exultantly as he glanced over the long roll of philosophers, orators, statesmen, and scholars who stood before him, "ready to serve him in the state or in the church, in the camp or in the school, at home or abroad. We have men for martyrdom, if they be required." No one can be enrolled in the Society of Jesus till he has undergone a severe and long-continued course of training. Let us glance at the several grades of that great army, and the preparatory discipline in the case of each. There are 4 classes of Jesuits. We begin with the lowest. The novitiates are the first in order of admission, the last in dignity. When one presents himself for admission into the order, a strict scrutiny takes place into his talents, his disposition, his family, his former life, and if it is seen that he is not likely to be of service to the society, he is at once dismissed. If his fitness appears probable, he is received into the house of primary probation. Here he is forbidden all intercourse with the servants within and his relations outside the house. A compend on the Institutes is substituted for his consideration, the full body of laws and regulations being withheld from him as yet. If he possesses property, he is told that he must give it to the poor, that is, to the society. His tact and address, his sound judgment and business talent, his health and bodily vigor, are all closely watched and noted. Above all, his obedience is subjected to severe experiment. If he acquits himself on the trial to the satisfaction of his examiners, he receives the sacrament, and is advanced to the house of the second probation. Here the discipline is of a yet severer kind. The novitiate first devotes a certain period of confession of sins and meditation. He next fulfills a course of service in the hospitals, learning humility by helping the poor and ministering at the bed of the sick. To further his advance in this grace, he next spends a certain term in begging bread from door to door. Thus he learns to live on the coarsest fare and to sleep on the hardest couch. To perfect himself in virtue of self-abnegation, he next discharges for a while the most humiliating and repulsive offices in the house in which he lives. And now, this course of service ended, he is invited to show his powers of operating on others by communicating instruction to boys in Christian doctrine, by hearing confessions, and by preaching in public. This course will last 2 years, unless the superiors should see fit to shorten it on the ground of greater zeal or superior talent. The period of probation at an end, the candidate for admission into the order of the Jesuits is to present himself before the superior, furnished with certificates from those under whose eye he has fulfilled his 6 experimenta, or trials, as to the manner in which he has acquitted himself. If the testimonial should prove satisfactory to the superior, the novitiate is enrolled, not as yet in the company of the Jesuits, but among the indifferents. He is presumed to have no choice as regards the place he is to occupy in the august corps he aspires to enter. He leaves that entirely to the decision of the superior. He is equally ready to stand at the head or at the foot of the body, to discharge the most menial or most dignified service, to play his part in the saloons of the great, encompassed by luxury and splendor, or to discharge his mission in the hovels of the poor, in the midst of misery and filth, to remain at home, or to go to the ends of the earth. To have a preference, though unexpressed, is to fall into deadly sin. Obedience is not only the letter of his vow, it is the lesson that his training has written on his heart. This further trial gone through, the approved novitiate may now take the 3 simple vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience, which, with certain modifications, he must ever after renew twice every year. The novitiate is now admitted into the class of scholars. The Jesuits, having colleges of their own, amply endowed by wealthy devotees, and to one of these the novitiate is sent, to receive instruction in the higher mysteries of the society. His intellectual powers are here more severely tested and trained, and according to the genius and subtlety he may display, and his progress in his studies, so is the post assigned him in due time in the order. The qualities to be desired and commended in the scholars, says the Constitutions, are acuteness of talent, brilliancy of example, and soundness of body. They are to be chosen men, picked from the flower of the troop, and the general has absolute power in admitting or dismissing them according to his expectations of their utility in promoting the designs of the Institute. Having finished his course, first as a simple scholar, and secondly as an approved scholar, he renews his 3 vows and passes into the 3rd class, or coadjutors. The coadjutors are divided into temporal and spiritual. The temporal coadjutor is never admitted into holy orders. Such are retained to minister in the lowest offices. They become college cooks, porters, or purveyors. For these and similar purposes it is held expedient that they should be lovers of virtue and perfection, and content to serve the society in the careful office of a Martha. The spiritual coadjutor must be a priest of adequate learning, that he may assist the society in hearing confessions and giving instructions in Christian doctrine. It is from among the spiritual coadjutors that the rectors of the colleges are usually selected by the general. It is a further privilege of theirs that they may be assembled in congregation to deliberate with the professed members in matters of importance, but no vote is granted them in the election of a general. Having passed with approbation the many stringent tests to which he is here subjected, in order to perfect his humility and obedience, and having duly deposited in the exchequer of the society whatever property he may happen to possess, the spiritual coadjutor, if a candidate for the highest grade, is admitted to the oblation of his vows, which are similar in form and substance to those he has already taken, with this exception, that they assign to the general the place of God. I promise, so runs the oath, to the omnipotent God, in presence of his Virgin Mother, and of all the heavenly hierarchy, and to thee, Father General of the Society of Jesus, holding the place of God, etc. With this oath, sworn on its threshold, he enters the inner circle of the society, and is enrolled among the professed. The professed members constitute the society par excellence. They alone know its deepest secrets, and they alone wield its highest powers. But perfection in Jesuitism cannot be reached otherwise than by the loss of manhood. Will, judgment, conscience, liberty, all the Jesuit lays down at the feet of his general. It is a tremendous sacrifice, but to him the general is God. He now takes his 4th or peculiar vow, in which he binds himself to go, without question, delay, or repugnance, to whatever region of the earth, and on whatever errand the Pope may be pleased to send him. This he promises to the omnipotent God, and to his general, holding the place of God. The wisdom, justice, righteousness of the command he is not to question. He is not even to permit his mind to dwell upon it for a moment. It is the command of his general, and the command of his general is the precept of the Almighty. His superiors are over him in the place of the divine majesty. In not fewer than 500 places in the Constitution, De la Charité says, are expressions used similar to the following: we must always see Jesus Christ in the general, be obedient to him in all his behests, as if they came directly from God himself. I wish to express a special thanks to all the supporters of First Amendment Radio, and our mission on true prophecy reformation. If you'd like to support the work here with a special one-time gift, it would be greatly appreciated. We, however, always prefer an ongoing, faithful gift of support for the labor that continues here always. So please consider carefully how much you are able to continue without undue hardship to your own household. In the least, please like and share and subscribe wherever you are receiving this work. Thank you.